Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second session of VisGuides. As promised, we're going to have the Q&A session. And if you still have any questions, please put them in Slido. We have been told that we should use the Slido as a means for collecting questions. So we have, is Yannick here? There you are. Okay, great. We have a couple of questions for you. That's what I was wondering. But otherwise, all the speakers are around. I'm going through this in order, so I start with Yannick. And we've got a question for you. Could you comment on the application of your pipeline to color selection in the case of cultures, which, for instance, categorize pink, red, orange as a simple shade red? Okay. This is the questions from Anonymous, I hope. Oh, yes. Yeah, there's your Anonymous.
Exactly. Yes, so that's a very good question and very important one. We actually comment on it in the way that we, for possible users, we give this as considerations, as design considerations for their color pipelines, that exactly these like cultural factors, maybe also for like deficiency or color deficiency cases, that you should consider this in your applications. We kind of raise awareness as the part of these like guidelines. And for example, one recommendation we give in the paper is to maybe give a small selection of possible color scales that could kind of address these issues. Yeah, this I think is probably the answer we can give in our paper.
We've got another question for you. How or if does the pipeline consider individual differences in color perception, such as color vision deficiency or text color synthesia? Okay. Again, a question from Anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's very similar answer to the case before. With this recommendations for maybe just giving a small but select list, for example, of color scales that a user can choose in the application. It's maybe a quite suitable tool for that. But we also hope to kind of, with the paper, raise this issue and maybe point a bit towards like more literature that designers could look at for these kinds of topics.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. We have a question for Jonathan. Did you talk about students of different ages, for example, kids versus college students?
So kids of different ages, no, we sort of in the paper talked about general people, but from a personal point of view, most of my education is higher education, although we do have activities that we go into schools, so people lower down, and it tends to be that the more, I guess, the higher education ones are more academic, the ones that we go into school are much more practical, but each fit in with the curriculum. There is a point to each of those lessons. There's something that they're learning for each of those lessons. So yeah, that's, I guess, the answer. Are there any more questions?
Is that the answer? Oh, we have got a question from...
Oh, right. Hello.
Yes, please.
So we run at my university we have a schools program where we go into schools, and it is the teachers who want to collaborate with us. So we don't really have that problem that you're suggesting there. We're sort of offering to this facility to the local schools, and they want to do it. I think because there is in the curriculum a lot of digital literacy within the curriculum, and I don't think necessarily they have the skills at the moment to do that. So it's basically skill training for those teachers, but also helping the teachers to do their jobs within their education. So yeah, we haven't got into all schools, and I think you're probably right. Some of the schools that are very sort of, we don't have the time. This is what we do. We're going to do what we're doing. But no, the digital literacy, especially in the curriculums within the UK, are very very strong, and down probably in the lower levels are probably more strongly, more aggressively taught than probably the higher levels. In fact, yeah. So probably don't really get that. But maybe we can talk offline. That'll be good.
Do we have other questions for Jonathan, since you're here now? From the audience as well? No. Not yet. Yes?
That's a really good question. So I think in the...
Can you repeat the question briefly?
Sorry, okay. So the question, as I understand it, is do some of the activities work with online? Do they work with smaller classes? Do they work with bigger classes? What's the appropriateness of the activity for the situation? I think is sort of generally what you're saying. And I think that's a really good question, or the topic to discuss. And in the paper, we sort of said, not all activities are going to be useful for every educator, because you might not, like sketching, I'm really good at, I enjoy sketching, so maybe I'm comfortable with that, but I know a lot of people are not. So actually standing up in front of the class and telling people to sketch and showing and doing it this way is going to be something very difficult for them to do. So you need to be comfortable for the activity as an educator to run it for that. So yes, that's definitely something. The other thing is not all activities are going to work online. You can't just map, as we've known from the pandemic and the situation we've all been in, you can't just push it on. You have to sort of adapt it. And also class size, especially assignments. Some assignments scale up much better than others. So if you're doing these activities to help you towards parts or segments of those assignments, then you have to sort of think who you've got in front of you, what are the lessons that you're trying to do. So yeah, and I think it's very difficult to say, this is the guidelines for you to do. I think it's going to be easier to say, here's all these ideas, choose them, but you are the academic or the teacher who can make those decisions. Yeah. Cool. That's probably my time, is it?
We got to what? More.
Is it Remco? Oh no, was it Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Hello, Daniel.
So earlier you shared about your experiences as, like not as a student, but I guess my question is like, how do you plan on integrating like students' feedback to like improve your program, or like to improve it or like to adapt it?
Yeah. So the question is, how do we listen to students and incorporate their feedback into perhaps your teaching next time? So yes, I'm guessing most taught programs have a process of reflection, a quality audit at the end that you have to reflect on the course, how well did it go, incorporate students' comments, and so forth. I always think you need to be level-headed. If you listen to every person's view, some things went wrong, some things went right one year, the opposite can happen the next year. So I think you need a little bit of a level-headedness. Let's learn from what people are saying, let's hear what they're saying, that went wrong, I'm going to change it, I'm going to address that one, but not that one. And I think, yes, but definitely listening to people, addressing those points. In our quality audit, we have to say, we are going to do this one, we are going to do that, we're not going to do this one, because it would start flicking backwards and forwards, and you're not progressing. You have to sort of think, where am I heading? What's really wrong with this? How can I improve this? Is your sort of background. But yeah, it's a really good question.
Thank you so much. We've got one question from Slido to Paul. What is an updated relationship between research and guidelines and practice with the proposed focuses?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly about an updated relationship, but I can sort of state what I think the relationship is. So researchers generate new knowledge, right? This is what we do. And guidelines are one type of knowledge among, several other types. I think that part is fine. I don't think guidelines are necessarily bad or unuseful. But I think the key is in the attitude or the perspective we take towards how guidelines are used in practice. And so I think if we look at how designers actually work, they don't simply use or apply guidelines, they appropriate them. And I think that's a key distinction there. And so designers appropriate guidelines, they appropriate all kinds of different forms of knowledge in ways that fit the situation, in ways that fit the context of use, and the skills and competencies and personal philosophies of the designer. So that directionality of research producing knowledge and end up getting used in practice in some ways not necessarily bad or wrong, but there's a subtle shift in how we think about the way that guidelines are used. Maybe that answers the question, I don't know. But.
Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions on Slido, but we have the microphone here if anyone has a question to our in-person speakers, but also to the remote speakers. So some of you had questions to Sheila in the beginning that we haven't addressed yet. Yes.
Yes. Well, I do have a question. It's actually for Sheila, but I would also like to hear from Paul. I think, Sheila is there. Very good.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Online
yeah,
people?
Perfect.
Okay.
So, because I was wondering, I've been working with guidelines for quite a while. And when, Sheila, when you talk about, about the harm of guidelines, when you talk about situated lessons learned or situating the practices, can we create? So why do you think it is not possible to create? So instead of having generalized, I almost go against generalization of guidelines because they are not useful. Where do I apply it? In which context? To which users? What is the goal that I'm addressing? Right? But what about guidelines that are more specific, that are situated, given certain conditions, that can somehow transfer some wisdom or advice to someone who is starting with it, as Paul also said, right? So why would that be something harmful, or what is your opinion on it? Thank you.
Okay, so, well, there's lots in there, and I think I appreciate Paul's use of the word appropriation, like to take on a guideline and think about it and make it your own. I still think that, I think the advice that I gave was that it's really important to learn about all the guidelines that do exist, because you can learn so much from them, learn about how different people have thought about the problems that you are tackling. But appropriating them is maybe, it depends how one does it, and I'm sure that that could be done in a way that is okay. But even then, I think that there is anything that has come before, including my own guidelines or whatever, anything that has come before may, not necessarily will, but may put limits on where you can go. Because the situation is new, and really you want to, as much as possible, open your eyes to the situation that you are in. But learning from other people's guidelines and figuring out how how it would be important for you to adjust and change them, or appropriate them, as Paul says, all of that makes sense. It's like an important part of your learning process. But when you come to a new situation, the important thing is to come with all of the learning one can have amassed at that time, but to work with what reality is where you are currently.
Okay, yes, yes. Thank you very much. Maybe Paul, if you want to add something. It's much more clear for me now. Thank you.
Sure, I'll try my best. So I think what Sheila was saying about design situations being unique is really critical. And so the question about what about specific guidelines that are maybe much narrower or more tailored or something, I think it's essentially the same answer, that because of the uniqueness of the design situation, the designer is essentially going to appropriate it. And when I say that, I mean that it becomes part of their tacit knowledge. And I think that's another key concept there. So when I've talked to designers, I've interviewed them and I've tried to understand how they think and how they do what they do. And oftentimes I'll say, well, how did you decide to do such and such thing? And they'll say something like, I don't know, it was my intuition, or it was a gut feeling. And really what's going on is not pure intuition as people might think it is. It's tacit knowledge that's built up, and skilled designers recognize cues that are part of that unique situation that they can then apply the knowledge to in that sense. And so even specific guidelines, again, I don't think they're bad or unuseful, but I think it gets wrapped up in the tacit knowledge that a designer has so that it can't be extracted in a way that it can be articulated explicitly. And that's what I see when I talk to designers. They don't say, oh, I used X guideline here, and then I use this guideline, and then I use this guideline, and out comes a visualization. They say, well, I don't know, it just seemed right to me, or I've seen it in this way before. And that's the tacit knowledge that's built, that they've built up through their skilled expertise. So
right. And I would agree that actually that knowledge can come from looking at other guidelines, but I think you have to realize that you can actually end up in situations that are radically different. Like when we run studies, even our ethics boards and stuff, they want us to have a set of questions that we're going to take to our, say, an open-ended interview. And when I was working with a group of people who were dealing with incredible daily problems, in particular living with pain at very high levels, their caregivers warned me they won't be bothered with your questions, but they may talk to you. So everything that we had prepared went in the first couple of minutes out the window. And you have to be prepared to let that happen, to let the reality of the situation lead you forward. And absolutely, every time I take part in any kind of design study, I end up richer for it. And so you do build up a type of learning, but some of that type of learning has got to do with the ability to let go, to change, to go with what's real, to be in the present moment, that kind of thing.
Do we have some comments or questions from those remote participants? Because you haven't had a chance yet. I just want to make sure. We don't have any more questions in Slido? Maybe nor in the audience?
Yes, or from the authors as well, from the presenters.
Exactly. Otherwise, I would propose that we could move to the breakout groups, and have a little bit of more discussions inside the room here. The way we thought we could structure this is we have 3 topics on our side that we would like to discuss in groups, and each of us can lead one of these groups. But we're also super happy for you to just discuss a little bit what you want to discuss. I think we have until 5 p.m. So giving this slight change in schedule, I would say that we have till 4:45, which is roughly half an hour. And then we can just have a little bit of a wrap up and to see where each of these discussions are going. The online, yes. And if you're here in the room, just stay with us. If you're online and it's not too late for you, I know in Europe it's getting super late now. Feel free to stay and to discuss online. I'm sure Sheila might be happy to stay a little bit. But otherwise, thank you for joining again.
Okay, I'm off at this point.
Okay, thank you, Sheila.
Okay, bye-bye.
So the way we can do this is if you have a topic or you want to get some people to discuss something specific with you, put it in Slido or just stand up and say, I want to discuss topic X. And I'm going to make the start. I would like to discuss guidelines in education. So if you want to discuss guidelines in education, that's me. And I'm handing over to Alex and Alfie.
Yes, so I would like to discuss about
Operationalization
of guidelines, automatization of guidelines, and the pros and the cons on that. So if you want to talk about it.
So I'm proposing visualization in the wild and guidelines in the wild. So.
And the idea for this discussion is if we could come up with tangible, actionable things like your next paper outline or a proposal or something that you can take away. So try to use these half an hour maybe to think, oh man, there has been so much stuff at the beginning of this workshop and in the questions. Can we somehow gravitate towards the next project or something that you think might be helpful for you? Thank you so much. And do we have other people wanting to talk? I mean, the room is ours. We can move around some of the tables. The groups are going to be with the person who is calling out the group. So again, I'm calling out my group, and I'm going right over to John Swabish because he said he's the interesting to talk. And Alex is there, and Alfie is there. And if you want, you just go to the microphone and say, I want to discuss about this and this.
I also want to say for online participants, there is a Discord channel called VisGuides Breakout. That's a voice channel that should act also as a kind of breakout room. So we have that in the online form as well. So feel free to join that and continue this conversation.
May I have your attention, please, one more last time for today. Your attention, please. We are having 15 minutes left on the program, and we're going to go through each of the groups to summarize briefly the discussion. We had a really nice discussion in our group, and maybe we can make the beginning. Unless do you guys want to make the beginning? Do you have a speaker? Okay, good. Do you have a speaker in your group? Okay, and we have a speaker in this group. Do you want to start? Okay, let's all pay attention to the speakers and see how the discussions turn up. And thanks again for staying with us. It was really nice discussions.
Hello, guys. So I'm just going to quickly summarize what our group has discussed on. So we were looking at visualization in the wild, guidelines in the wild. So our idea comes in is we're going to actually start looking at VisGuides. What great visualization are there in the wild, why it works, and we reflect on it. So we sort of thinking of starting off doing a collection of visualization in the wild, asking people to define it, and then building a website. And from there, we start dissecting the reason that's been given by each individual and creating a taxonomy. And then we want to see how do they define what is a great visualization in the wild. And then we're going to start building a website and a data collection and looking at the different definitions. So obviously, we're going to start off with a Google Doc. We exchange email address. So those that are interested, please come and see me. And we're going to actually start building a taxonomy of the different papers and the different definition. And then we'll start thinking about probably looking at the useful visualization that fulfills a purpose. And then from there, we're going to actually see which direction we go. Probably not a workshop, or probably maybe a panel discussion, or maybe a survey paper that could probably come out of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Alfie. Okay, may I show my screen? Is it possible? What do you think? Come on, obviously. No, I'm kidding. I was like, oh my God, so much to deliver from Alfie. How can we catch up with so much work? No, we use the Miro. I will start anyway. what is this? Yeah, sorry, the wrong one. That was me. Thank you. Whoops. Awesome. Oops. Okay, I will start anyway. So we started with the, well, we started in asking a lot of questions. And among them, arguing as a motivation that some of the guidelines that we currently use drag us, I don't know if it's a correct word because, hey, I was the one who wrote it, back 20 years, right? So some of the guidelines that we are using do more harm than well, and this is maybe, well, we discussed many other reasons why, but maybe the main reason, as Paul said, is because of the appropriation of these guidelines. So I changed the name of the group to VisGuides Appropriation, that at least I can pronounce. Let's get started with something. Appropriation. So from now on, it's appropriation. I will appropriate it. And then we move to, okay, what we can do actually is to make people think critically, and this means when we teach, when we do the design. So to have awareness in which situation to apply the guidelines, because guidelines are not itself problematic, but it depends on how they are used. So it's all about the situation. We talk about validation and the need of empirical evidence when recommending a guideline or a practice. And in cases where this evidence is contradicting, they are that I think we mostly agree, or we all agree, that expert designers are key to make the decisions. So should we move? Should we radically move from guidelines? And what is a guideline? Who defines what is a guideline? What is a practice? If we move from them, so we have also the other side of the coin. That is that some people need this kind of a structure. So it's a structure. So we have a we are as humans, we need these structures to move forward. So this was the discussions. I think we can continue as well in a Google Doc and think of ideas how to put this all together in a summary. I don't know in which kind of report, but yeah. I think this is it, right? Or yeah? Good. Thank you. And now, there you go.
So can you leave that? Can you leave it? Can you leave that up? Can you leave it?
Yes, of course.
Okay, hi. So our conversation actually mirrored a lot of what's up here. We didn't do a mural board. We made a interpretive dance. So no, just kidding. So I guess I'd say just a few things. So we spoke for a while, kind of disagreeing with Sheila, or sort of trying to pick apart some of the nuance, because I think where we ended up, group should disagree with me, but I think where we ended up was Sheila sort of built this, if you think about it, kind of like a Venn diagram or just a circle of guidelines, and focused on the negative space and how guidelines are bad, but not the positive parts of guidelines, which I think are in here. And we talked about how guidelines are useful for certain groups, and we focus, of course, on the education piece. So we all teach different types of people. So some people, the metaphor I think that worked really well was swimming. So you can't just tell people, we're going to teach you the butterfly if you don't know how to swim. You can't just throw a kid into the pool, they're going to drown, right? With someone who already knows how to swim, you can then start to teach them the butterfly. So the guidelines help you to at least know how to swim, and then, as I think is up here, you can start to break those rules. And then we talked a little bit, at the very end, a little bit about how one might go about evaluating different activities within the context of teaching, how one might evaluate some of the activities that Jonathan and his 500 co-authors worked on, and how we might take that into several different classes, use it in several different ways to test the efficacy of those. Anything else I missed?
I think the other thing is that critical thinking. What are we doing as biz educators? And I think that critical thinking is very important. We are teaching people to think critically about the data, about mapping it out, and use it for so forth. So that critical thinking, I think, in my mind, is very important. You've got that back in there. Yeah, this is a really good summary of what we discussed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Very shortly before you. So I think that if we could, please write the ones. So we don't have all your emails. So if you want to write something like a reflection afterwards, and send us an email, and we will set up an initial meeting, Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Also for next year's or for the future of the workshop, we're really happy to learn from you how this workshop can be continued, and we're looking for people who want to continue it. We have done it for 3 years now, and we're really looking for more people or other people to get involved. I think I'm just putting this here without having discussed with my co-authors. So if there's any suggestions at the moment, that anyone has a question about how to continue, or a suggestion maybe of how to continue, we may just do it again in 2 years, I think. Yep. Yep. Again, something I haven't discussed with my co-organizers.
So the idea is to be second year. So it's like an implicit idea. We never discussed it.
So again, if you're interested in contributing and co-organizing, talk to us. And I think the very last thing to close this workshop, again, thanks for coming. And we're going to dinner tonight, obviously, at the Melting Pot.
The Melting Pot. There is a lot of fondue, but there are also other options.
It's fondue and also other options. I haven't yet figured out the connection between Oklahoma City and fondue, so maybe I'm gonna do it because.
So those that want to join for dinner, meet with Alexandra, because she's making the reservation.
Yes. So if you're joining us to dinner from the Omni Hotel, we meet at 6:20. That's 6:20 in the lobby. And if you're not here, we can see each other at 6:30 at the Melting Pot.
Exactly.
That's 6:30. Yeah.
The reservation is confirmed.
The reservation is confirmed for many people, right? And your name?
And my name, Alexandra.
Alexandra. So if you're there already, just ask for the Alexandra.
Yeah. We will make a space for you.
Good. See you later for dinner, and have a nice conference. 6:20 in the lobby. Here, yeah, and there's a guide. Oh my God, what a pun!